I think, ma'am, like there's a voice disturbance.
Now the glitch is solved. So let me quickly introduce myself. I request all of you to please stop sharing the screen, otherwise we'll have to remove you from the live class itself. Ria, could you do the needful, whatever I told you?
Yeah,
Guys,
yeah, sure,
please
sure.
stop
I'll do it
sharing the
right
screen.
away. Yeah.
It really messes with the flow of the live class. I'm really sorry, but yeah, there are a few protocols that you need to follow. First of all, you have to be on mute throughout the session. Towards the end, when we are taking up the questions, the last 10 minutes, you can unmute yourself and ask me the questions directly. Otherwise, if you have questions in mind, you have to like put it down in the chat box so that we quickly proceed. And if you feel something relevant, note it down somewhere, because it will be difficult for me to repeat each and everything which I'm demonstrating here. I'll be sharing the ingredient list in the chat box just now. So all of you grab the screenshot, please. Allow me a moment to do so. So here is the ingredient list today. We'll be doing a layered cake called as the chocolate decadence cake for today. It will have a chocolate sponge followed by the chocolate fudge frosting that we'll use as a frosting for today. So we'll wait for 20 seconds so that everybody grabs the screenshot. Once you have grabbed the screenshot, quickly write down a thumbs up or a done in the chat box so that we can quickly proceed in the session for today. Right? Perfect. We'll wait for a few more seconds till we get approximately 20 likes. More. So, fine. This looks good to me. So we'll quickly proceed in the session. So I told you that today's workshop is all about learning or getting done a layered cake, which is called precisely a chocolate decadence cake. And it will have a chocolate sponge followed by some fudge, another chocolate flavor frosting for today. So before starting with the demonstration, I would quickly take you through that little bit of theory that is really required for you to know whenever you're starting to go ahead do a layered cake for you guys, right? So talking about a component of a layered cake, there are basically 4 components of a layered cake. The first is the sponge, the second is the frosting, the third is the filling, the fourth is the garnish or the decor. Now, out of these 4 components, there are 3 components that you could do or prepare well in advance. What are those? The first could be a sponge. Yes, you can very well bake your sponges well in advance and you can store it up like this. See, I have wrapped these sponges in the plastic wrap and you are ideally supposed to store it this very way. Now, where do you store these sponges? We are going to store these sponges inside the freezer. Why I am telling you or suggesting to store it in the freezer? The freezer will ensure that the moisture inside the sponge is nicely trapped and your sponge doesn't dry out quickly. Otherwise, if you are doing it in the refrigerator has got the property of trapping away all the moisture from the things. So it will become drier and unmoist, right? So ideally store it in the freezer. Now, how long can you store the sponges which I'm going to discuss today? Easily up to 5 days. Make it in bulk, use it for the next 5 days, right? Now, the second component which you can do in advance is the filling. Yes, you can prepare any of the fillings and keep it in the refrigerator in an airtight box for max up to 3 days. 3 days is the maximum time you could store the frosting. I would not suggest more than 3 days because it would tend to alter the flavor of the frosting in that case. The third component which you can do in advance is the decor or the garnishes for your stacked cake. So you can do your garnishes well in advance and you can store them and use it on the day of assembly of the cake, right? The fourth component, which is the crucial component of a stacked cake, which is a frosting. No, you should not ideally do your frostings in advance. You should always do it fresh on the day of cake delivery. Now, when do you go ahead and do it? Now, let's assume today you are going to bake a cake for your client. Now, you have already made the sponge. It is lying in the freezer. You are going to deliver the cake today. Now, you need to assemble the cake now. So, in the morning itself, what you will do is you will take out this sponge which you had kept in the freezer. Now, this is hard as it was stored in the freezer. You keep it on the countertop like this to completely thaw. By thawing, I mean you need to bring the sponge which was stored in the freezer to its normal texture and softness. So you need to keep it on the countertop to completely thaw. This would take approximately 2 to 3 hours of time. Now, you can utilize this 2 to 3 hours of time to prepare your frosting. Once you are done, keep the frosting in the refrigerator for 30 to 45 minutes so that it becomes nice and spreadable. When everything is ready, you could arrange everything and stack up your cake. Now, once you have decorated the cake and everything is finished regarding the decorated cake, you can store it in a cardboard box inside the refrigerator for max up to 2 hours. Why I'm saying not more than 2 hours? If you store it more than 2 hours, you will have to, like the frosting which you have used to cover the whole cake will tend to dry out, which means the melt in the mouth texture and the texture of the frosting and your cake would be gone. Which means, so not suggested for more than 2 hours. And that too in a cardboard box. Now, we will quickly start with the sponge today that we are doing. We'll do the sponge today in the air fryer, which I have. We'll bake at a temperature of 180 degrees just because we are using an air fryer. So all the air fryer and convection oven people can bake at 180 degrees. OTG people can try out the recipe at 170 degrees. Okay, so I would spotlight my overhead camera. Is my workstation visible clearly and nicely to everybody? So I'll share the ingredient once more. Done? We'll come to the timing and things like that, okay? Once we are done with the batter. So I'll be using an electric whisk here. You can easily do this whole recipe with the manual whisk you have at home, right? Now, in this bowl, you have already got the ingredients. Let's go through it. It calls for some oil and sugar in a bowl. I've taken castor sugar and oil in this bowl. I have some vinegar here in this bowl. Rinki Singh, I have already shared the recipe twice. Let me demonstrate. Again, I'll share it towards the end. Now, this is some milk which I have. I'll discard the cream. Now, I have some cow milk which I use at home. You can grab any milk according to your preference. Which oil you should take? Any unflavored oil would do the job for you. Vinegar is normal synthetic vinegar from the brand Tops. This is an all-purpose flour, some cocoa powder, and some baking soda, and a pinch of salt also. Cocoa powder is from the brand Van Houten, and it is of the medium intensity darkness, right? So we'll quickly start by just mixing or combining the oil and sugar together till it is fully incorporated, right? So let's quickly preheat because we are starting with the batter. I'll quickly preheat the air fryer quickly and we'll be back with the demonstration. So the oil and sugar is fully incorporated. Now what I'll do is I'll be adding this vinegar inside the milk. Now I've added whole of the vinegar inside the milk. Now this will quickly convert my milk to a buttermilk, right? Now it has started to curdle. I can see few milk solid stains in the spoon. It has started to curdle. Now I will be transferring this buttermilk inside this oil mixture completely. Now it is a room temperature milk that I have taken. I'll continue to mix this. Everything looks homogeneous. Now I will be adding the dry ingredient in parts. Now I told you, now if you want, you can't, if you don't want to use the milk and vinegar, you can take store-bought buttermilk also, right? Now I will quickly give this dry ingredient a good stir. Always shift your dry ingredient at least once. Now I am giving it a good stir so that the baking soda mixes very well. Mamta ma'am, we have already started with the sponge recipe. Now, I'm giving it a good stir so that the baking soda mixes very well with the other dry ingredient. Now, whenever you give it a good stir, it will perform a nice and even and a uniform reaction throughout, which is utmost important for our recipe. Now, the baking soda, which is sodium bicarbonate present in the dry ingredient, it is coming in contact with the buttermilk, which is an acid. So these two reactions will perform and they will produce nice carbon dioxide bubbles, which is going to stay intact in the batter till you are baking it. With this carbon dioxide reaction, you will be getting a nice pores, nice fluffiness and a rise to your sponge. Now, you should avoid using anything which is not like, avoid using additional leavening agents because baking soda and the buttermilk is doing our job, right? So always add the dry ingredient to the wet in parts because we want a gradual reaction of carbon dioxide to take place. Now, all those who are new to this confectionery industry, I'll tell you a technique called the cut and fold method, which is ideal and very useful to mix your batters. Now, why it is useful? Because the cut and fold technique will help you not fidget with the carbon dioxide that is being produced. And in the batters where you incorporate nice amount of air, you will not be deflating the air that you have incorporated. So cut and fold method is always a good practice to go ahead and do. How do you do it? Scrape the sides of the bowl like this, cut in the middle. Fold, and cut. Now I have added a pinch of almost half teaspoon of coffee powder also in the recipe because I like to enhance the intensity of the cocoa powder, which you can do by adding few pinch of coffee powder, which is the instant coffee powder in it. So I'll add in the second batch. I'll be quickly mixing with the electric whisk. But if you are not pretty sure about how much to mix, don't try electric whisk. Do it with the hand whisk, the folding part, right? I'll add the third batch. Followed by the last batch. ममता मैम मैं अभी नहीं बता पाऊंगी, मैं एक डेमोन्स्ट्रेशन के बीच में हूँ and it will be difficult to like redo things for you now. If possible, if time would permit, again towards the end, मैं एक summary दे दूँ. ठीक है? Now, I'll scrape the sides of the bowl once. Now, how much do you need to mix? Once you don't see any lump of flour, you are good to go. Done? Now, I have got a cake ring here with me. Now, to tell you about when you will check the recipe calls for some like basic normal water, which we have added to just adjust the consistency. That particular quantity of water can be added towards the end, or you can add it with the milk itself. I prefer adding it with the milk. You can do it according to your preference. Now, I have this cake ring here, which is 5.5 inches. I'll get some aluminum foil and wrap at the base. Okay. Start folding like this. Done. So this is done. I've covered from the base. Now I have got a tray here. I'll be putting it on the tray, and I will be using this as a parchment paper at the base. Instead of ring, you can use a mold if you want. Any mold according to your preference. Now, look at the consistency of the batter that I'm having here. Almost like nice flowing consistency, like a ribbon it is falling. So, this is the perfect consistency for our cake. I am doing half of the quantity or the recipe that I've shared. It is going to give me a 350 grams of sponge, which I will utilize to make a half kg cake for myself. Right? So, this goes inside the air fryer at a temperature of 180 degrees for a time of approximately 35 minutes. OTG people, you get a time span of 35 to 40 minutes. Insert a skewer after 35 minutes. If it comes out clean, you are good to go. Otherwise, bake it for approximately 40 minutes. Right? Now, I'll quickly be back. I'll pop this inside the air fryer and I'll be back with the demonstration. Yeah, I'm here. So this was the cling film wrap I was talking about. This is a very plastic thin wrap that you easily get in the market. You should cover your sponges using these cling film wraps. You should always cover your frosting with these cling film wraps. Unwrap it, and whenever you are taking it out of the refrigerator, give it a good mix so that it becomes nice and soft. So the frosting I've already done. I'll quickly take you through how do you do this frosting. So this is basically a fudge frosting. So what is fudge? Fudge is basically when you boil milk, sugar, and fats together, you would get a buttery based sweet thing, which will almost melt in your mouth and it will have a nice chewiness or a bite to it. So fudge frostings are ideally buttercream based frosting, where we mix the butter, sugar, icing sugar, and cocoa powder to make it a chocolate buttercream. Later, we will be adding some ganache, which is a rough proportion of melted cream and melted chocolate. We warm them separately in the microwave and we mix them both together and we add it to the buttercream to get our fudge frosting. So it will be nice and melt in the mouth. At the same time, it will have a nice bite to it, right? Similar to a fudge. That is the reason it is called a fudge frosting. Now, I would quickly introduce you to a few of the tools that is really required when you go ahead do the assembly of a cake, right? So, the chocolate which I've used is from the brand Van Houten. It is 46% dark chocolate that I have used for this particular frosting, right? Now, allow me a moment to get the water for the soaking syrup. So, I would take you through the ingredients that you would require to do a assembling cake or a stacked cake for you. This is a cake turntable. We are going to stack our cake on this very turntable. This is a cake board. The cake will be directly on this cake board where we are going to stack it. Now, this is a pastry brush which we'll use to nicely soak up the sponges. I'm using just plain water to soak my sponges because I feel that the fudge frosting is way too nice sweetness it gives to the sponge and balances out the taste well. So I'm not adding additional sugary syrup. Now, how do you make a simple syrup or a sugar syrup? You need to boil equal parts of water with equal parts of sugar. You have to boil it for 3 to 4 minutes nicely. After it is nicely boiled, you put it off the heat and you let it cool. You can store it in the refrigerator. Now, if you feel the sugar syrup is way too sweet, you can add a bit of water to dilute it to reduce the sweetness. Now, if you want, you can use plain water also. This is an offset palette knife. Just because it is bent from here, it is called an offset palette knife. If it is straight, it is called a normal palette knife or a straight palette knife. This is a serrated knife or a bread knife that we'll use to cut layers of the cake. This is a scraper, a metal scraper precisely, which we use to give clean edges to our stacked cakes. Now, these are some nozzles which you could use to pipe nicely. Rosettes, star, different types of nozzles are there, which you can use to pipe on the stacked cake. Now I have got this sponge already cut with me. I'll quickly stack it for you guys to see how you should do it. Now I've got this 3 layers of sponge. I'll start with it. The first layer goes in. Now, whenever you are starting to stack your, yes, it is fine. Whenever you are stacking your cake, you should ideally arrange everything on your workstation, then go ahead and start stacking. Now, you should put some frosting at the base like this, spread it nicely, put the bottom layer, stick it nicely. Now, you need to soak it up with the water like this, generously. Now, how much to soak up with? I'll tell you. Now, I am just, are you able to see everything? Ria, is it fine? Yes. Then whosoever is facing the difficulty, try rejoining again, please. Now, I'm using or touching the sponge which I've soaked with my index finger. Can you see some nice amount of water on my index finger? So this much soaking is really important. So generously soak up your sponges. Now, put some frosting on it. How do you eyeball the quantity? Just randomly take some quantity of frosting and spread it using this offset palette knife. How do you hold it? You put the index finger on top here. You put the thumb on the side just to give it a support like this. And I'm going to push the frosting out and in, out and in. This way I'm going to spread it nicely. Outwards, inwards, outwards, inwards, outwards, inwards. You see how nicely you will be able to just spread it like this. Easy peasy. Done and dusted. Now comes the second part. We'll do the second layer. Now, this sponge is cut, so I'll quickly do only 2 layers for you. But traditionally, it is about getting 3 layers of sponge followed by some frosting. And if you want, some filling in the middle also. Now, I'll soak the top layer also. I'm doing only 2 layers for you because the second layer was a bit cut from the side. Now, if you are presenting this type of cake to your client, assembled cake I'm talking about, where you get to see the sponge, the frosting both, then it will be called a nude cake or a naked cake, right? Now, the next step to a naked cake is basically a crumb coated cake. Now, what is basically crumb coated cake? We will continue to give a very light coating of the frosting so that this crumb coat falls or forms a nice skin for your stacked cake. Now, after crumb coating your cake, it is mandatory to store your cakes in the refrigerator for at least 45 minutes so that this skin forms a nice hold on the stacked cake. Now, after it is crumb coated, you take your cake out, go ahead, do a thick layer of frosting. Now, crumb coated ke baad you can do any frosting of your choice, which I'm talking about the thick layer. Thick layer, you can just switch the frosting. Like, let's say I have done the filling and the crumb coating of the fudge frosting. Once it is thoroughly chilled, I can do a whipped cream layer also. I can do a ganache layer. I can do a cream cheese frosting. I can do an Italian-based meringue frosting. Anything can be done, right? So, we don't have much time to refrigerate it after crumb coating. So, I'll quickly do a thick layer for you guys to assemble an easy peasy cake for you. So, simple frosting aise rakho. The same way out and in, you are going to spread the frosting nicely. Fatafat se we'll do it. Now, what about the sides? Yes, we are going to put the frosting on the side also. I'm not using a whipped cream. This is a fudge frosting. Now, how do you put on the sides? Put some frosting like this on the sides and spread it nicely like this. Okay. Now, the sides are almost being covered up. I'll quickly assemble and make sure that each and every bit is covered. I'm talking about the sponge. This is a very minimalistic and a rustic cake that you could do. See, weekends are approaching. You could make this easy peasy cake with all the ingredients that you already have at home, and you could surprise your family and loved one with it. And don't forget to post some nice pictures on the feed of the BitClass app. I'm covering the sides nicely, making sure that there shouldn't be any gap. Now, too much of rework is not advisable. 3-4 stroke mein it is minimum you should complete or finish it with a smooth line and edges. Otherwise, if you rework for a quite long time, you will tend to melt the frosting, which will, like, the whole structure of the cake will be spoiled then, right? Done. Is everyone with me? Are we going good and easy at a nice speed so far? Yes, perfect. Giving it a nice top. Now, I told you this is an easy peasy cake. So let's make a rustic top or a nice, not a very fancy, clean top, a rustic looking top for us. How do we do it? I'll scrape some frosting. I'll put on the top like this. Now I will use my palette knife to create some creases and bends like this. I'll put some more. This is called basically a rustic look to your cake. So I'll put some more here and I'll continue to do that pattern. S ka pattern hame banana hai to get that rustic look of the cake. Done? Easy? Now, before delivering the cake, it is utmost important to clean the cake board. So I'll get a tissue and we'll clean the cake board first. Dip the tissue in some water like this. Dip it in some water. Then go ahead, clean it up nicely. Clean. Clean. Cleaned. Done. Done. So I'll quickly wash my hands and we'll be back. So our chocolate decadence cake is ready. A very rustic looking cake that we have done today, an easy peasy method that we have used to assemble our cake. Now we would take up the questions now. But before that, Ria. Okay, we'll take few questions. Then Ria would come up and talk about the extensive class that we have.
Yeah. Sure, ma'am.
So from the bottom, एक बार फिर से पहले से बताना मेरा miss हो गया. We'll do it towards the end. You can use Rich's whipped cream or Delight. Rich is gold is a premium cream that you can use. Can you sum up 4 components? I told you 4 components were sponge, frosting, filling, and garnish. Which whipped cream is good for health? See, if you talk about good for health, then dairy whipping cream is ideal and good. But dairy whipping cream won't withstand all the heat and exposure of temperature that you guys are providing it to. So nowadays, whipped cream, it is all about taking a very bad thing or a normal bad thing. Whipped cream is not at all good for health just because it is based on hydrogenated fats, lecithin. So you can take a good brand precisely if you are trying it out. Frosting हमने बनाया जैसे हम बटर क्रीम बनाते हैं, so हमने soft butter लिया था. We have whipped together butter, icing sugar and cocoa powder. उससे हमारा chocolate butter cream बन गया. Then we added in the mixture of melted cream and chocolate together, जिससे वो glossy and fudgy बन गया. Warm cream means you need to warm up the cream in the microwave for at least 10 to 20 seconds. Never add a very chilled cream to the melted chocolate because it will tend to seize the chocolate. How to start a business without frosting method? I won't be able to help you out with that. Which whipped cream did you use? I'm not using a whipped cream. It is a fudge frosting. So we'll stop here. We'll take up a few more questions again. But Ria, would you come and share a few pictures that we have already done in the masterclass?
Yeah, sure. So you want me to share the pictures? So here it is. Just a second.